Minnesota just made the boldest move of the Anthony Edwards era.
News from Shams Charania. The Charlotte Hornets are trading star guard LaMelo Ball and Josh Green to the Minnesota Timberwolves for Naz Reid.
Breaking news out of the league. The Charlotte Hornets are sending LaMelo Ball and Josh Green to the Minnesota Timberwolves in exchange for Naz Reid. This trade can only go one of two ways.
This is right now, to me, the best backcourt in the NBA.
A championship or a total collapse.
I think this is a step backwards. And I think they've taken steps backwards since the Cat trade.
There's no middle ground here. And the moment this became official, the basketball world split right down the middle. Some people see the best backcourt in basketball. Others think Minnesota just took a massive step backward. 6 years after being drafted first and third overall in 2020, Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball are finally on the same team. Sources say Edwards was thrilled when he heard, and he understands better than anyone why this trade happened. He's lived the exact problem this move is trying to fix. So today, we're breaking down the vision behind Gamble, what it actually cost Minnesota to pull off, and the risk that could blow the whole thing up. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly where you land on this trade. Let's rewind. After 2 straight trips to the Western Conference Finals, Minnesota's season ended in the second round this year against San Antonio, the lasting image. Anthony Edwards walking over to shake hands with the Spurs, while there were still 8 minutes left on the clock. That wasn't a guy accepting a loss. That was a guy who ran out of answers, because the Spurs exposed the same weakness that's followed this team through the entire Edwards era. Minnesota has never had a real second playmaker in the backcourt. Every year it's the same story in the playoffs. The offense slows down, and it all comes back to one option. Get the ball to Ant and hope he creates something. Different names have tried to fill that role over the years. None of them stuck as the long-term answer. Then it got worse. A key rotation piece went down with a torn Achilles in the playoffs, and suddenly the point guard hole was impossible to ignore. Behind the scenes, the front office was staring down a bigger question. How long can you ask your franchise star to do everything before he starts thinking his best shot at winning is somewhere else? Minnesota couldn't afford another quiet summer. They needed a real swing, and the name they kept circling back to was LaMelo! Who was LaMelo Ball on paper. The fit looks almost too perfect. LaMelo averaged over 20 points and 7 assists a game this past season, his healthiest year since 2022. But here's the number that really stands out. With LaMelo on the floor, Charlotte's offense was elite. Without him, it dropped off a cliff, one of the biggest on-off splits in the entire league. That's a guy who can carry an offense by himself. And that's exactly what Minnesota has been missing. Insiders say this move is about giving Ant a real...
Minnesota, this is a move to get Ant Edwards the kind of backcourt running mate that he needs. Ant Edwards was a guy that people, after Giannis getting traded, were like, is this the next star player to be traded? He has watched Karl-Anthony Towns go to New York in a trade that ended up not working out and win a championship. Where is his mind, his head at? He's tired of being double-teamed. They get him a dynamic scorer in the backcourt. You throw a double team in Ant Edwards with LaMelo Ball on the court, you are playing with fire. LaMelo will drop 10 3-pointers on you in the blink of an eye. And so this is what their move is. To accomplish this,
running mate. Someone who can share the shot creation burden and stop teams from just doubling Edwards every possession. Both Edwards and Ball were among the league's most prolific put-up, 3-point shooters last season. Historically, when 2 players hit that combination together, their team has had a top 2 offense in the league. That's rare company. Here's the stat that really tells the story. Edwards shot nearly 50% on catch-and-shoot threes last season. Best in the league among high-volume shooters. Sounds great, right? Except only about a quarter of his 3-point attempts actually came off the catch. The rest came off the dribble, where he's significantly less efficient, because nobody else on the roster could consistently create looks for him. Now picture replacing that workload with a 6'7" point guard who has elite court vision and can bend a defense with a single move. Edwards could finally spend more possessions moving without the ball, running off screens, and getting the exact kind of clean look that's been the most efficient shot in his arsenal all along. LaMelo also finished among the league's top playmakers at his position, top in three-point makes for a guard. But Minnesota's front office reportedly values something even bigger than the box score: what LaMelo does for Rudy Gobert. Gobert has never played next to a true elite lob passer. LaMelo could change that immediately, unlocking a part of Gobert's game that's been dormant in Minnesota. Add in LaMelo's love of pushing pace, and Minnesota suddenly has a real path to easy transition offense with Gobert running the floor. Something they've quietly lacked in recent playoff runs. On paper, this backcourt has the talent to be the most difficult matchup in basketball. And more importantly, it's a direct answer to the exact flaw that has ended Minnesota's season 3 years running. Now here's what it cost to get there. This marks the third time in 5 off-seasons that Minnesota has torn up its roster. The Gobert trade in 2022, the deal that sent Karl Anthony Towns to New York in 2024, and now this. Just days before this trade, Minnesota had already shipped out a starting forward and a first-round pick to clear enough cap room to fit LaMelo's contract under the second tax apron. And then came the centerpiece move, sending away last year's 6th Man of the Year to Charlotte. For Timberwolves fans, that's not just a role player leaving. That's arguably the heart of the roster's culture walking out the door. An undrafted player who became one of the most beloved names in franchise history. In 1 week, Minnesota traded away its entire power forward rotation, and the picks weren't spared either. An unprotected future first-round pick, multiple first-round swaps, and several second-round picks are now gone. That's essentially every meaningful draft asset the franchise had left. There's no reset button here anymore. If this doesn't work, there's no easy path back to rebuilding. The draft capital is tied up well into the next decade. Analysts have pointed out the trap that comes with an all-in strategy like this. Once a team starts trading future assets for present-day value, it becomes a cycle that's hard to break. Until, eventually, there's nothing left to trade. That's no longer hypothetical for Minnesota. It already happened. So here's the real cost. A legitimate co-star for Edwards, paid for with a fan favorite, a cap-clearing move, and nearly a decade of draft capital. Bold, but the cost isn't even the biggest concern. Look at the roster today and the problem jumps out immediately. There is no proven starting power forward on this team. None. The only significant size behind Gobert is a teenage rookie who barely played last season. For years, Minnesota's identity was built on size and depth up front. Now Gobert is the last big man standing. That matters because last season, this team spent the vast majority of its minutes with 2 bigs on the floor together, and only a tiny fraction of minutes with Gobert as the lone big. That split was the blueprint for surviving size-heavy Western Conference contenders. Now Gobert is entering his mid-30s as the only reliable interior presence on the roster. And LaMelo isn't known for defensive effort. Opponents are going to target that matchup relentlessly. You could slide a wing up to cover, but that just weakens the perimeter defense LaMelo needs behind him. This is genuinely uncharted territory for the franchise, which is exactly why the reaction around the league has been so split. Maybe Minnesota already has a follow-up move lined up. The front office isn't known for leaving a roster half-finished. But until that happens, the real question is whether they have enough financial flexibility to survive the gap. And that's where it gets tricky. Minnesota is now hard-capped near the second tax apron, with very little room left.
Basically only on winning. I look at winning. Charlotte, you're going to have some time that's going to happen. With Minnesota, they were in a situation where it's like, y'all need to move the needle or else things are going to start shifting around.
To fill out the roster. In today's NBA, that's barely enough for minimum salary depth. Nowhere near enough for a real answer at power forward. From here, every fix has to come via trade, and there's almost no flexibility left to make one. Then there's the fit question. Both Edwards and LaMelo are used to controlling the ball. Someone has to defer, and that gets figured out. Land a real answer at power forward before training camp. This roster suddenly makes a lot more sense. If they can't, they're heading into the season with minimum salary depth and an aging Gobber stretched thinner than ever. And that's the entire bet in one sentence. If LaMelo stays healthy and the fit clicks, this is a championship-caliber backcourt. If the ankle issues return or the chemistry never comes together, there are no draft picks left to fix it. Vegas has already adjusted the title odds in Minnesota's favor after the trade. Better, but still not favorites over the West's top young contenders. So does this change everything for Minnesota? Yes, it solves the exact flaw that ended 3 straight seasons. But whether it changes things for better or worse is still completely up in the air. The version that works looks like a real finals run. The version that doesn't looks like the start of a long rebuild, with none of the usual tools to speed it up. So where do you land? Legit title contender, or a franchise that just bets its entire future on one health-dependent move? Let me know in the comments. And if you're into deep dive basketball breakdowns like this, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
Go into the season with one big and Rudy Gobert, especially with all the guys they're going to have to go through the West, going through Jokic, going through Wemby, going through Chet. Like they're going to need some size to add there. But as far as LaMelo Ball, listen, he's exciting. He's a hell of a talent. He can put up a lot of good numbers, and he's filling a hole that this team needs. Now there's just another hole that they need that I think is more major than what they needed in the first place.
Narration rewritten from scratch based on publicly reported facts, not copied from the source video. Adjust delivery, pacing, and word choice to make it fully your own voice.